Well, hello everybody. Mark Wallace with Brook Memory Care in Zionsville, and welcome to our March Senior Living series. I have two very special guests with me today. Mary Milberger, who lives here locally in Zionsville, and Kathy Malloy, who is a social worker with Paradigm Health. Today, I think we're going to talk about an important topic that affects many millions of Americans, and that is the topic of being a caregiver. And I think it's something that it hits home with a lot of families. And I wanted to just have a nice conversation with you guys today. And Mary, as a caregiver yourself, having lived it and experienced it firsthand, caring for your spouse, and also Kathy, as a social worker, you deal with many families who are going through this. Just to start us off, I stumbled across a report from AARP that there's 41 million Americans who are in the role of caregivers, and added up, that accounts for 34 billion hours of care in a typical year. And I think that is just an amazing number, and I think that number is just going to be growing as
our baby boomers keep aging every day.
Yeah, it's going to just keep going and going. And we all know caregiving starts at home when a loved one went through illness or disability. It's the spouse or the child that steps in and takes that role. So Mary, maybe just talk about your experiences. Tell about your story.
Well, my story started when Tom realized something wasn't right, and we discovered that he had Lewy body dementia. Fast forwarding like 3 years from the time of something's not right to discovery, and he did very well for a long time, but he did have to. As he lost his cognition, he lost his ability to know what to do, when to do. And that's when the caregiver role jumped in for me. And I was looking at our vows that we've always had on our wall at home, and we didn't say till death do us part, but we would have loyalty and love for each other until the day I died, or the day he died, which means my life for him is still going on, my love for him. And that's true. When you've had, back up again, 40 years, I've had 40 years of wonderful, true love with a good husband. Being in this support group facilitator role that I'm in for the LBD, I tell my folks, enjoy what you have now, because you will be dealing with the equivalent of a 2-year-old, and then maybe even younger, as the dementia takes away more and more of their life.
Certainly.
But in our case, the dementia did not take away the personality, so he was always there.
That was such a blessing.
Yes, it was.
A blessing with his particular diagnosis.
So many times I was told LBD meant they were going to get violent and all that. Nothing like that. So you don't need to be afraid of stepping in and being a caregiver. Yeah. You just rearrange your life so that you can.
And talk about that, rearranging your life. How did being a caregiver, being his full-time primary caregiver, how did that affect your life as well as the stress, and was it stressful, and things you did? How did you cope with that?
I coped with it by listening to the doctors. When you're caregiving, you become a team, and it's so important to have a doctor that you can communicate with and who knows what they're talking about. That helps. And then some of them will say, you must take 8 hours a week to yourself alone. Well, that didn't happen. I didn't have that. But I did have, and I kept that, I had a circle of girlfriends, and my younger ones and I would get together monthly. My son would come over and stay with his dad while I went out and had 3 hours of fun.
Perfect.
and it was wonderful fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had my old ladies that I played cards with, but I came home rejuvenated when I was with the younger girls. Sorry. I've always been around the younger people. So that's how I coped. And what else am I going to do with my life? Where I feel sorry for are the wives that are still working, and they're trying to, they're so close to the end of their career, and now they're dealt this. What are they going to do?
Right.
They are in a hard place.
That's so when they're working and trying to balance, whether it be the spouse or an adult child. I think when they're trying to care for a loved one, that stress just compounds.
Yeah, it does.
And I think you hit a very important point you put was have a team in place.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Have a team.
exactly. You said two things that I always recommend, and that is education and support.
Oh,
And
yes.
those are the two things you talked about. The education, meaning your team and the doctors, and really understanding what is happening really eliminates a lot of fear, like you talked about. You don't need to be afraid. Just educate yourself on whatever diagnosis or disease process that is. And then your support system. So who's your tribe? Who is your, who is your village? Who's going to help you, to give you that relief? So the term respite, I like that, and it just means a short period of rest or relief. And it's so necessary for caregivers. So you also found some ways to do it, not maybe that, 5 days in a row, but finding that time to play cards or, get out of the house or,
But then
just
when
do
it
something
when it
for
got
yourself.
to be very intensive, there was no break.
Yes.
I mean, you
Yeah.
learn.
Oh, yeah.
You learn to do what you have to do.
Mhm. Yeah.
And not everybody is willing to take that, but I was.
Mhm.
And I would do it tomorrow for him.
Sometimes it's a baptism by fire when you are thrust into that role of a caregiver, and all of a sudden it's learning all these new things, and you were very blessed that you were able to have Tom at home.
Yeah. I did have to hire help.
Yeah.
And that became a nightmare
Mhm.
because everybody was having nightmares finding
With staffing.
helping
right?
everybody,
In
not
the
just.
midst of a pandemic.
Yeah.
It's pretty challenging. Yeah.
It became very challenging.
Mhm.
But yes, the education. I don't care if it's cancer or a dementia or whatever you're facing. You need to, as a caregiver, need to learn everything you can so that you know what the doctors are talking about, and then two, you in the caregiving role you can be a step ahead of the need.
Mhm.
And
Very well said. Yes.
Absolutely. So when we talk, assembling your team is so important, and educating yourself. Kathy, what are some other, when you are talking with families, what are some of those top of mind, what are the top 3 tips you can give to families who are all of a sudden thrust into that role of a caregiver?
Especially when we're at those, in this 24-hour mode. I used to talk about basic self-care, and that's just, proper rest, proper nutrition, and taking, some time for yourself out of the day, whether it's a few minutes, a half an hour, but really focusing on just trying to take care of your basic needs is a good place to focus.
Yeah. I always tell families when I meet with families, it's practicing self-care is not a selfish act in itself.
Right.
So it's something I always try to promote to many families.
Mhm.
So it's a very, it's a hard job, but it's a job that comes out of love, as we all know. Where can we turn for help if you find yourself thrust into that role of caregiver and not knowing where to turn? Where's the first place to go? What would you suggest?
well, your first place would be to family, but guess what? Families don't always show up. In my case, my son did, but my other family did not show up. So then friends, and then the pocketbook of paying for paid help either.
There's some wonderful organizations, and you've talked a lot about different forms of dementia, and I really love the Alzheimer's Association at alz.org, and they really have a lot of caregiving support, lots of education series. That's a great place to get education. And then also you mentioned your care team, so that is, can we add some services, can we add some home health, some therapies, or can we add some palliative care an added layer of, care and support for symptom management. Are we nearing hospice? All of these, programs offer a lot of support to the caregiver.
What we don't offer for people with dementia, though, is the Medicare does not cover what dementia patients need. They need palliative care. They don't need the true hospice care, but you have to put them in hospice to get that palliative care. And then you have to almost educate the hospice that no, when they go into a behavior, you don't give them Haldol. You mentioned one organization, but there's other organizations. The Parkinson's Association help people tremendously, and so does the Lewy Body Dementia Association.
Absolutely.
And that's the little guy that's not out there very much, but I am the voice of LBDA for Indiana.
You are the voice.
I'm sorry.
And you're a strong advocate and a strong voice for those with LBD.
But that's where we get our education.
Yeah.
You go to their website and you read and you read and you read.
Right.
And you have to sometimes you have to educate doctors. I got lucky and found a doctor that was glad to find me too.
Good.
Well, it's a full-time job. It's a job that comes out of love, and but there are resources out there with your family, with your doctors, or the professional organizations that represent the different diagnoses. So, Mary, thank you so much for coming. Kathy, thank you for coming and joining us today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.